Now, great news. Earlier in 2020, we announced that in July, we were bringing down none other than the father of polarized training, Dr. Stephen Seiler, from Norway to the Gold Coast for a one-day workshop, sustainable training for attainable endurance goals. And then, of course, COVID struck and all international travel was off. Dr. Seiler is looking to get down under into the new year as travel restrictions open for his one-day workshop on the Gold Coast. However, the great news is, in the meantime, the Physical Performance Show team have been working to secure Dr. Seiler for a 2-hour exclusive live stream happening on the same day as the scheduled in-person live event, Saturday the 18th of July, 3 to 5 p.m. The live stream has already had significant interest from coaches, athletes, health and medical professionals, fitness professionals, and students, all from a very affordable price point of $49, with tickets available as of the launch of this podcast, Thursday, the 30th of April. To secure your ticket to the Dr. Seiler live stream, Sustainable Training for Attainable Endurance Goals, jump over to pogophysio.com.au/Dr. Seiler live stream under the Services tab.
Hi, this is Dr. Dan Plews, applied sports scientist and Ironman Triathlete, and this is the Physical Performance Show.
Failure is not an option.
I've had my ups and my downs.
I think it's an absolutely breakthrough experience.
Welcome to the Physical Performance Show, the show designed to inspire the pursuit of your physical best performance. I'm your host, Brad Beer. Listen in as we delve into how the world's top physical performers achieve their success, as well as the highs, the lows, and the journey of getting there. Let's get ready, set, let's go. Welcome to the Physical Performance Show, brought to you by Pogo Physio's online physiotherapy consultations for runners and triathletes. I'm Brad Beer, sports physiotherapist and exercise scientist by trade and training, and founder of Pogo Physio. Each week, we'll bring you the latest and greatest information and inspiration designed to help you perform at your physical best. Of course, we do this across a range of different episodes, interest editions, featured performers, coaches' corners, and expert editions. And on today's episode, we cover a very important topic for the endurance athlete, and that is one of training for heat acclimation, featuring an expert who truly knows the topic, Dr. Dan Plews. By way of bio, Dan Plews is an applied sports scientist, researcher, and coach. He's also a competitive triathlete in his own right. How competitive? Well, Dan boasts the age group World Hawaii Ironman Championship record, a stunning 8 hours and 24 minutes set in 2017. As an applied sports scientist, Dan has worked closely with athletes who have won more than 25 world and Olympic titles in sports, including rowing, kayak, and triathlon. Dan was part of Rowing New Zealand's preparations for both the 2012 and 16 Olympic Games as a sports scientist. As a researcher, Dan has a PhD in exercise physiology with particular interest in heart rate variability and 30 peer-reviewed publications to his name. As a coach, Dan has coached 3 professional Ironman triathletes to sub-8 hour times, including Terenzo Bozzone, Jan van Berkel, and Tim van Berkel. And it's this rare mix of applied sciences and research combined with real-world practical application that makes Dan's insights into the topic of heat training and acclimation so fitting for this expert edition. Recently, Dan founded EndureIQ.com, an online learning hub for anyone interested in optimal long-course triathlon performance. And the third course to go live is all about heat training and acclimation. And I was fortunate to grab Dr. Dan just before the release of this online course to talk through all manners of how an athlete can prepare to race in the heat and reverse engineer their training to ensure the best performance on the day. Topics covered include heat stress, the physiological adaptations to heat training, heat as a training tool, cooling strategies, active versus passive heat training strategies, including saunas, spas, and training in the heat, and hydration and cooling strategies. Get ready with a pen and paper. Oh, and you're probably going to want to listen back to this one. There is so much in this expert edition. Here is my conversation with Dan Plews, PhD, heat training and acclimation for the endurance athlete. Dan Plews, PhD. This is a real thrill. Been wanting to explore the topic of heat acclimation, acclimatization, or whatever term we want to give it for some time. So to have someone of your rich background, not just athletically, as per the bio, the Hawaii Ironman, fastest ever age group athlete, 8:24, coach of elite Olympic athletes, your exercise physiology background, your PhD. So to have someone of your capacity sharing around this is a real buzz. So welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me. Good to be on here. I've listened quite a bit, to be fair, and I was thinking, when's Brad going to invite me on? I was feeling a bit hurt.
Oh, well, apologies for any hurt. We got there, right? And obviously we've both been talking behind the scenes about, Dr. Stephen Seiler's contributions and looking to hopefully have him at some point down under and also across the ditch there to New Zealand.
Yeah, well, that's the plan if anyone's ever allowed to travel again, of course. But yeah, that'll be, hopefully. Otherwise,
there's always online. But Dan, this is a big topic and certainly is not something I've visited since my exercise science days at university. But if we start with the basics, heat acclimation or adaptation, what is it and the terminology? I mean, we're talking about athletes of all levels, recreational to elite, preparing themselves to race in a hot environment. So let's start with the basics.
Yeah, so I guess when it comes to the heat, what we know is that in certain hot conditions, and we look at like the ambient conditions, which can be a combination of solar radiation, humidity, and just general ambient temperature. All those things combined make us get a lot hotter. So there's something called wet bulb glow temperature, which is kind of a combination of all those things. And the reason that we combine them is because as humans, there's two things that are really affecting us. It's our ability. One is how hot are we getting, but then the next point is our ability to actually dissipate the heat. So how effectively we can remove it. And as humans, we're actually really, really good at that. It's actually one of our evolutionary advantages is that we are very good at cooling. So compared to other mammals, for example, they get rid of a lot of their heat through respiration, through panting. So, you take your dog for a run or whatever, and he's suddenly on the sidelines, like panting. Whereas humans, well, obviously we haven't got any fur for one, but the main way, there's some respiratory cooling that goes on, but the main way is that we get rid of it through evaporation. So sweating, and the sweat evaporates from the skin. So that's why we have to consider all angles. So at one point, you've got the heat, but you've also got the humidity. So the humidity will mean that the evaporation is less, which means we will get a lot hotter. And and what we know is that there is always going to be some decrement in performance when in a hot environment. The trick with heat acclimation and why we're so interested is we want to know what can we actually do to make that decrement as low as possible.
Geez, that's great. So much there. What can we do to make that decrement in performance as least as possible? And just to recap, Dan, you said that the ambient conditions are made up of solar radiation, humidity, and the general temperature. So I think it's sometimes an easy thing just to attribute it to the general temperature, right? And neglect to consider those other factors.
Yeah, exactly. And I actually lived in Singapore for 4 years. So over there, it's a hot place, but we also did a lot of racing in Malaysia. And to this day, one of the hardest races I've ever done is a race in Malaysia that started at 10 a.m. So a half Ironman. So you hit the run at like 1 in the afternoon. And it was like, and literally the word death march is the best descriptive for that. It was absolutely crazy. But the reason it's so hard in Malaysia is because not only is it hot, it's very, very humid as well. So, everyone knows that you'll be running along and you're just dripping with sweat because the sweat's not evaporating off you. And the thing that cools us is not the fact that our skin's wet, it's actually the evaporation of the sweat that is the cooling. So in very dry climates, like in deserts and where it's really quite dry, we actually can be much more effective at cooling, so we can cope with much hotter temperatures. So 30 degrees in like 40% humidity is not the same as 30 degrees in 95% humidity, which is why Kona's a real problem, because it's both hot and humid. So we have the two confounding factors, and also the solar radiation is really high. So
the humidity influences the amount of evaporation, which therefore has a greater impact. And I think anyone that has raced in hot and humid versus hot and dry conditions certainly can understand that. And I believe that day in Malaysia, Dan, you did still have the second fastest run split behind Peter Jacobs. So
yeah, I did actually. That's
clearly your science and background is being applied well.
That's amazing. I'm amazed that you know that. That's incredible. But yeah, it wasn't a fast time. I think I still ran like the one. That's how hard it was. I ran a 1:28 for the second fastest run. Yeah. So there you go.
Gosh, a true death march for someone of your abilities, Dan. If we sort of fast forward, we've all seen things go wrong in the heat. But is there a continuum of heat illness? Like, what is heat illness? What goes wrong?
Yeah, I mean, I guess this is down more of the medical side, and there's various schools of thought in this. Like, the old school of thought was that we have this like critical core temperature, that basically, our core temperature gets to what was thought to be 40 degrees, and then we have this catastrophic failure and we slow down. But it's because we're getting too hot. And like most athletes have this kind of inbuilt mechanism that would slow you down before the point of where you get catastrophically hot. And then in the case of the Brownlees, when Johnny Brownlee, he had that heat failure where Alistair then helped him across the line. It's a prime example of someone's almost overriding that the point where your body wants to stop, but he's kind of overridden it, and that's what happens. He's got a complete heat illness, and he pretty much collapsed, right? So that's basically. But where it's coming from is mostly to do with just overheating, core temperature overheating, and yeah, at a certain point, proteins will start unraveling. We know we will never get to that point, but you can get a lot of muscle damage. You can be sore, and then it's basically your body trying to shut down your metabolism to cool you down. So, and that's what most people don't realize when it comes to heat and how hot we're getting. People think many will relate it to how long we're going, but intensity is the driving factor of how hot we get. So if you look, there was a study that was published that looked at the core temperatures in a cycling road race versus in a cycling time trial. But because the cycling road race was over such a long duration, the powers are a lot lower, which means the metabolic heat production is a lot less. So you're seeing much lower core temperatures, whereas on shorter distances, higher power outputs, higher metabolic heat production, generally we get higher. So that's when we're at the most risk of being of heat illness and heat stress.
So thinking back to what you said there in the opening, there's two factors to consider: how hot we get and how well we dissipate heat or remove heat. So in the case of a heat illness, like you mentioned Johnny Brownlee there in Mexico there that year, it's a factor. It's a combination of both. He just got too hot, and then there was perhaps the fact that he couldn't dissipate heat as well, or you can't really split them apart.
And also a lot of it is to do with pacing and how hard you're going. So someone like him, like you think, I mean, even though he's the smaller guy, his the fact that he's running so fast, it requires a lot of metabolic work, which means there's a lot of metabolic heat storage, which means that he would be getting really, really hot. So the people who are going harder are often, who can go faster, like these elite guys are often at greater risk than your average Joe or your age grouper.
And it comes back perhaps to what you just said, that intensity is that key driving factor of how hot we get. So it's intensity, not duration.
Which is why the first thing that happens when we're getting too hot is we slow down, because it's the body's ability to reduce the metabolic load to then hopefully cool the core temperature and make us feel cooler.
Yeah, so interesting. And Dan, then I'm thinking of another example. Callum Hawkins, UK-based marathoner at the 2018 Commonwealth Games, within a few kilometres of the finish. Very hot conditions, started mid-morning. And once again, I guess, would your suggestion be that it was the intensity that's probably cooked Callum?
Yeah, it would be the intensity, and who knows what the actual reason was, but more often than not, it is the intensity. And that's the problem with you can prepare as much as you like, but it can be hotter. It can often be hotter than you're expecting on the day. But yeah, it's basically, I would suggest that he's got too hot, and he maybe hasn't done some good heat acclimatization before it. So
and that's certainly something we want to touch on today, is some strategies from the science and the field on how to best try and adapt for these hot conditions come race day. Dan, physiological heat adaptation, what physiologically happens? Like, how do we try and adapt if we're going to go race the Hawaii Ironman World Championships, Kona, like you mentioned before, or a marathon in Singapore, or wherever it may be? What physiologically is happening to our body to make us able to better withstand the conditions on the day?
Yeah, there's a few physiological adaptations that occur. I mean, if you go through a proper heat adaptation protocol, and not mentioned yet, but like in my we have an online course that we're building at the moment that's all around heat adaptation, and one of the tutors is Julia Quesadillo, who actually did her whole PhD in this very area. And then I also got Chris Stevens, who's an Aussie, who also and they talk about, this is their two topics, but I can definitely talk about it a little bit more in terms of the actual adaptations that we see from a physiological standpoint. I mean, one of the major ones is that generally we see a lower starting core temperature. So that's a major one, because then you think about your heat sink is a little bit deeper. So the way I like to think about it is that if you've got a bucket, for example, and you're filling it with water at a set rate, there's only a certain amount of time. It's a certain amount of time before it overflows. But if you've got a bigger heat sink, you've got a bigger bucket, so you can pour water in at the same rate before it overflows. So that's one advantage. And what we also see is generally that rate in rise of core temperature is a little bit slower. So that's one of the major ones. The other ones are earlier onset of sweating. So people will start sweating a little bit earlier, and generally people would start sweating a little bit more as well, which obviously helps with the dissipation of the heat. Not so helpful, obviously, in a humid environment. I mean, my personal feelings on adaptation, and this is purely from an anecdotal and having experienced myself, is I do think that the adaptation can be very environmentally specific. So, for example, you get a lot of guys who are going to Kona, they go to Texas, and they do a lot of heat adaptation there, which is a very dry heat, whereas Kona is a very humid heat. You look at the textbooks, they'll say that nothing matters. It's only if the core temperature is the most important thing that happens. But me personally, with athletes that I've worked with, I've seen much better results when you get as close to the specific environment as possible. So hot and humid, if that's where you're going to be racing, that's where I would suggest you want to also do your training. But it comes with the caveat that too much time, it's a very stressful thing, so you can get a bit overcooked quite easily if you spend too long in the heat doing some hardcore heat acclimation stuff.
So that's a great tip, to try and make it as specific as possible to what you're likely to encounter on the day, hot and humid or hot and dry. And on the physiological adaptations, you mentioned the lower core starting temperature, and you mentioned that greater heat sink. Rise in core temperature is a bit slower, and then the earlier onset of sweating plus possibly more sweating. And then there's cardiovascular adaptations, isn't there, Dan, and blood plasma and different things happening as well?
Those ones are kind of the core ones that help you cope with the heat. And obviously the plasma volume helps you cope with the heat, but it's also a bit of a performance advantage. So there's two areas, like there's the heat acclimation side, but there's also more and more literature coming out now in the area of actually training in the heat is a performance benefit for race or for training in temperate conditions, for racing in temperate conditions. So you can go and do a 3-week heat training camp, even though you're going to be racing in a temperate conditions. And that comes down to this plasma volume increase is one of the main reasons that that people believe that they're seeing those advantages. Because more plasma volume means that you're basically, more blood volume, lower heart rates, the old Frank Starling effect with the stroke volume of the heart, the stretching of the heart and the pumping around the systemic circulation. So that's one of the main things is that plasma volume. Of course, if you've got more blood plasma volume, super important in terms of how you hydrate and your hydration levels as well. Because one of the first things to happen when we sweat a lot is we do lose a bit of extracellular fluid. So if you've got more to start off with in the blood plasma, that's only a positive thing.
And I guess this, Dan, is sort of references this heat as a training tool, which I know is one of your online modules for your Endure IQ online course. So it can be used as a training tool, even if you're not going to race the Hawaii Ironman World Championships. You're going to try a qualifying race in more temperate conditions. Yeah,
for sure. And I've actually got one of my PhD students. So I'm a researcher at AUT University, and one of my PhD students, Ed Maunda, his PhD is in this very area. So he looked at substrate metabolism in the heat. What happens to basically how you burn fat versus carbohydrates in a hot versus a temperate condition. And that's one of the main things that he looked at. But then he's also looked at a training effect. So we had two groups. One group did all their bike training in a temperate condition, and the other group did all their bike training in a hot condition. But what was really interesting and unique about this study is if you look at most of the training studies that are to do with the heat, they'll do it at a set power. So for example, one group might do it at like 80% of their VT2, for example, of power output in the temperate, and then the same in the heat. But what happens is that the heat group have much higher heart rates and much higher training stress, which is obviously therefore they're at an advantage because training is a simple dose response relationship. They've had a greater training stress, so they generally perform better. But in this particular instance, we clamped it on heart rate. So what happened in the temperate group is that the individual would be doing 260 watts, but as soon as they go into like 130 heart rate, but in the temperate, they would be down at 200. That same person would then be at 200 watts at the same power output. So we kind of equaled the cardiovascular strain. But what we collected muscle biopsies, performance data. The performance data was a 2-hour depletion exercise and a 30-minute time trial. So it's pretty intensive. I was a subject myself, but I was in the temperate group. But yeah, to cut a long story short, not to give too much away because we will publish it. We're seeing massive differences in terms of the heat group being a lot better.
Yeah, okay. So the takeaway would be that consider using heat as a training tool.
Yeah. Considering, it's quite amazing because if you look at the total work done of the heat group in terms of mechanical work, it is a lot less than the heat group, a lot less. But yet their performance improvement in a temperate condition, because the time trial was done in the lab in a temperate condition, is much, much better, which defies kind of, we always think that the more power we can get, or the faster we can run, the better the benefit. But in this particular case, that's not the case, because they were actually going slower at the same heart rate, but something else is actually happening where they've seen those great benefits.
And so the takeaway for the listener, without yet having published that piece of literature, Dan, would be to what?
Yeah, I think if you can incorporate some form of heat training in your regimes, even if it's in a temperate environment, temperate conditions, you are actually getting more bang for your buck in terms of the training adaptation.
Yeah.
So we actually collected muscle biopsies to look at the mitochondrial protein. So that is one way that you can definitely see if that, which group is getting more signals for adaptation. But we haven't actually analyzed all that data yet. So the muscle's frozen. You have to have a big needle in the leg and take out a little bit of little bit of your thigh muscle. But yeah, so that will confirm why this is the case. So yeah, pretty exciting.
And Dan, I think this is where your input is so highly valued, because you live the research and the academic world and pathway, but then you bridge the gap to the practical application of this, and not just from a standing on the sidelines point of view, but then putting it into practice yourself. So this is really exciting stuff. Dan, in terms of, the how-tos, so someone listening in's accepted that, okay, they're probably experienced, they need to somehow try and prepare for the rigours of the conditions they may meet on race day. Or even if it's going to be cooler, like you just mentioned, consider using heat as a training tool. The big and obvious question and impossible one-liner is how? What are the strategies? And I'm also curious, Dan, short course versus long course, short endurance event versus long, how it might differ. So sorry to throw you a very tricky one there.
So with my feeling with this is that you kind of have like your A standard or your A goals, and then you kind of teeter down to what most people can actually have available to them. So if you think about the very, very best would be actually going to where you're going to compete or very similar environment, do a good substantial 3-week block there, and then and then you get real. That's the best way you can get the best heat adaptation, is exercising in the heat, long exposures, periods of time where you have a high core temperature, really, really good. But then you can kind of come down where there's other things. What you can do is you can try and heat your own gym or whatever that might be. And then you can look at even doing things like sauna and spa stuff. Like sitting in a hot spa would be, the kind of the next level. So we know that exercising in the heat is probably better than passive heat work. So just sat down in a spa or in a sauna. So it kind of goes up on that scale. And if you can actually spend a long time there, then that's really good. So I'll talk you through what I think is the A standard, the best way to do it. And this is exactly how I prepared for Kona in 2018. So I went to Kona for a 2-week period, which was between 4 to 5 weeks before the event. And I did a good hard training block there. And then I actually flew back to New Zealand, which is actually quite an easy flight, same time zone, just 8 hours. And then once I got back to New Zealand, I spent that time training in New Zealand, which is really good because, as I mentioned before, spend too long in Kona, spend too long in the heat, it can really cook you because the stress is so much higher, which we've already talked about. I came back to New Zealand. I did training in the temperate conditions, but whilst I was here, I used small blocks of sauna and heat chamber work to keep the stimulus, keep it kind of amplified. And then I went back out to Kona 10 days before the event, and that was enough to then bring me back up to speed, because there is this plasticity of response, is that you don't, once you're out the heat, you will lose some adaptations, but it takes you a very short time to get them back up as well. So that's kind of the gold standard. But in 2015, I took a different approach, where I used blocks. I did a significant block of sauna work, day in, day out for like a week, where I would be in there every day, which was 2 weeks out. And then I would scatter it just 3 times a week, just before I left for Kona, and then I left for Kona on that same week. So there's lots and lots of different ways you can do it, but that's the crux of it.
It's a framework, and Dan, thanks for sharing. There's a lot there. Just sort of thinking there. So you mentioned there's active and passive ways to do it, and the active, i.e. exercising in the heat, which seems quite commonsensical, but not always practical, depending on people's situations, is definitely the gold standard. Spending as much time out there at high temperatures as possible without overcooking yourself. And your example, I guess, going to Kona for 2 weeks, cooking yourself, high stress, but then going home and slightly being less cooked is a good example. And it worked, right? It's a world record age group. It's a fast day, but it's a fast time and an unbelievable performance. I think you ran 250 off the bike that day, right?
Yeah, which was the fifth fastest run of the day. So,
yeah,
I would say myself, I'm not the best, I'm by no means the most physically gifted. There's definitely people who ran slower than me who are way better runners than me on that day. But I think I did a good job for my in my heat acclimation. So my decrement in performance was a lot less than most people, which is what we talked about, is that the decrement is going to come. You have to accept that. But by how much is what you can stop. You can make that as small as you possibly can, and I think I did a good job at making that as small as I possibly could.
And I've heard you mention there on the Zwift triathlon podcast, of which you do the Zwift program in for the tri course there, that it's not about how fast you go in these long course races. It's about basically how the least deterioration possible.
Yeah, it's about the least deterioration and how easily you can do it. Long course triathlons, it's an interesting, I talk to a lot of age groupers and they're like, what do you want to achieve? You go, I want to get faster. And I'm like, you don't need to get faster. You can run the speed required to run a 3-hour marathon today if you need to. But the problem is you can't do it easy enough. And that's a really, really, really important thing to remember. And that is quite a nice little segue to, we talk about the easiest and we talk about running an economy. If you look at one of the main determinants of how well people cope in the heat, is running economy is absolutely critical. Like, good running economy means more efficiency, means less metabolic heat production, means that people generally perform better in the heat. And Patrick Langer is an absolute prime example of why he is so good in Kona. A one-trick pony, only ever races well in Kona, always does it on the run. He's a small guy, but also look at him run. Like, his economy is clearly very good. So he's, he can Kona is the race for him.
You're listening to Dr. Dan Plews on this, an expert edition, heat training and acclimation for the endurance athlete. Support for today's show comes from Pogo Physio's online physiotherapy consultations, ideal for the injured runner or triathlete looking to get back to their physical best. To find out more about Pogo Physio's award-winning services, including our online consultations, jump over to pogophysio.com.au. There you can easily schedule your 45-minute online consultation with myself as a senior sports physiotherapist or any of the Pogo Physio team. For now, let's jump back on this expert edition with Dr. Dan Plews on all things heat training and acclimation for the endurance athlete. Dan, you mentioned some passive strategies for people trying to prepare for the heat, heating their own gym. If we just walk through these, if we can, is that like, putting a heater on and doing a session in the garage, or, what are some practical examples, and how hot do we need to make it to be effective?
Yeah, well, you need to make it hot enough that it's slowing you down. I mean, you want to be getting the core temperatures up to, it's pointless me saying it, but, you want to be getting to the high, mid to, above 38, even to the high 39s, high 38s. But I mean, that's an impossible thing to measure, but you want to get to the point where you're seeing considerable cardiovascular strain, in that, your heart rate should be, for the same sort of work or the same sort of power you were doing in temperate conditions, you should at least see it 10 beats higher, at least. That's a kind of a good rule. And what's quite good about that as a rule is that as you progress and you get better heat acclimatized, if you have your heart rate as more of a guidance, you can actually make it a little bit hotter, because as you get used to it, you can keep the stress the same by making it a little bit hotter. How you can achieve that, I know lots of people have done different ways. One of the really effective ways is actually fill your bath up with water and actually do it in the bathroom. Make it really hot in there, put some heaters in there, make it humid, run the shower, get some moisture in there, and then do a session in there. That is the best way to do it, and it's horrific. It's so hard. So that's quite a good and effective way, but it depends if your wife will let you ride your bike in the bathroom.
Yeah. And you're on rollers too, Dan, so I'd be curious how that goes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. That's a really good way to do it, but yeah, I don't know. I only know of one person who has ever past his wife. So if you live on your own, maybe you can get away with it. But.
Reclusive long course triathlete. No, look, that's a great example. So fill the hot tub up, put the shower on if you can. Get permission, of course, from your partner, and the key thing, I like what you said there. Get the heart rate up 10 beats, and you're probably somewhere in the sweet spot.
Yeah, somewhere in the sweet spot. I mean, it can be like I've done sessions in the heat chamber where I've got it so hot that my heart rate's higher than my power, which is crazy to think, right? When you consider what I could do in a temperate condition, you can get it. That's probably a bit too hot, but you can really make a big difference with some of the heat when you really crank up that heat volume. So, which
I think is quite encouraging for people, because if you don't live if you've got to prepare for an event in the heat from your cold climate base, the season you're in, the geography that you're around, then it's quite encouraging to know that you can still try and move towards some level of adaptation to the heat. Saunas and spas, Dan, I must admit that I had written off saunas as just a gimmick until recently, being in Ethiopia and going into a sauna with one of your Kiwi compatriots, Zane Robertson, and he swore by the sauna as a tool. And I'm like, all right, I better get rid of my prejudices and actually start to better understand this. I mean, protocols, how does someone approach a sauna? Are you implementing that?
My big dream is to get a sauna in my house. I would absolutely love a sauna in my house. But I mean, I don't know anyone who's ever done sauna stuff. It's like, it's so, I have a sauna where I work. So I would be like, I just go and, you think you're going to go in there and have a sleep and relax, but it's just horrific. Like, all you do is go in there and time moves. Like, you feel like you've been in there for a day, and it's like 10 minutes later, and it's really hard. So the sauna stuff, obviously it's been in the press a lot because of the health benefits, but the heat acclimation points are really good as well. So you have to decipher what you're trying to achieve. So we're talking about heat acclimation here. Zane, I assume, uses it more for a performance standpoint. So there are certain things that you would do if you're just trying to improve your performance, like increase plasma volume and whatnot, okay, that you wouldn't do if you were heat acclimatized, for example. So for things like drinking water, cold water during the sauna, takes away from the core temperature, makes it easier, which means that you're not getting the same heat adaptation. So someone like Zane might do that, but if you were really trying to do some good heat acclimation, you wouldn't do that. Also, doing it at the end of a day or after a session, doing a run first when core temperature is already a little bit higher makes it a lot harder, but you're getting a much bigger heat acclimation benefit. So if you think about what that means, is you're already going in with a high core temperature, so then your period of time with a maintained high core temperature is much longer. So you're getting better adaptations on that. So there's lots of little nuances that you can do to make it better, or make it more effective. But the same rule applies, is that you should be looking to get that heart rate just sat there at least over 100. I could sit there some people will be more than that, but for me personally, I can sit there with my heart rate over 100, and you consider I'll run a marathon at 145. So it's that you want to see a certain elevated heart rate to make sure that you're doing it right, and how hot you want it to be. And you want it to be uncomfortable. You want to be not enjoying it. If you can go in there and have a sleep and you're all happy and fine, then it's probably not hot enough for you.
How to approach it. Is it 10 minutes, several sets, or is it just a 20-minute block, or is there any sort of best practices, Dan, around this?
Yeah, so generally, and one of our lecturers in our course, Julia, Julia Castillo, she specializes in this, and what she suggests and what she's found in her PhD is the best way to approach it is, say you've got an event, so 2 weeks out you would do a concerted block of sauna work that would be consecutive over maybe 5 or even 7 days, when you're in there every single day. And that duration of time can be anywhere between 20 minutes to 30 minutes, depending on how you cope with it. And then during the last week before you actually do the event, you kind of do alternate days, and then you would stay out of it for 2 days before competition to give yourself that time to freshen up. That seems what most people are doing, and it's quite effective. So it's not as good as being out there and doing prolonged stuff, but it can work.
And you could combine them. Obviously, you did that in 2015. You to a degree, you combine in. Or did you not in 2015 because you trained from New Zealand only and did the sauna?
So I did some heat chamber work. So we have the university I work in, we also have a heat chamber. I did do some work in the heat chamber, but I kind of moved away from it for that very reason, is that I was still in a temperate conditions. I was still trying to get the quality of my training done. And I think this is where sauna can work really well. Is that if sitting in a sauna, you get some good adaptation, but it doesn't kind of wipe you out so much. Anyone who spends 90 minutes in the heat chamber exercise, you get out of there and you're fried, and it takes away from you then doing quality sessions for the rest of the week. So I was still doing my quality sessions in a temperate condition, still getting the quality in, not too much stress, and then using the sauna at the end of the day to get my heat acclimation. And lots of people, especially the more professional, the elite guys, they tend to get some good heat acclimation anyway, just for the fact that they can produce a lot of metabolic heat. So you'll find that the really elite guys, they seem to be better when they go to a hot race at coping with the heat generally. Obviously fitness is a major thing, but one of the main reasons is that even at home on the trainer, they're producing 400 watts of work. That means that they are also getting very hot. It means that they are getting elevated core temperatures more easily, more so than your average recreational athlete who might do an interval at 200 watts, for example. Just the overall metabolic heat is a lot less.
Yeah, okay. So that's, it makes sense when you think about it, that they would have a greater ability to adapt and regulate, because they can just go harder and produce more heat. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So you think about how in their day-to-day training, they will generally be getting a lot hotter than your average Joe generally. So
yeah. So interesting. And Dan, I imagine with you using saunas, it's no different to any training stimulus. It's the individuality, it's the responders and non-responders, and it's a good old art and science, right? So there's no
for sure. And some people cope with it better than others. We use it. So part of my other life, I also am the physiologist for the women's kayak, the New Zealand women's kayak team. So we use it a lot. We use heated gyms, which is a whole other area of topic, but we also use sauna work, and we use the sauna work more when we're doing more of a heavy gym focus and the conditioning on the water is less, because we're trying to maintain some kind of cardiovascular stimulus by just tapping it onto the end of the day when the overall cardiovascular endurance aerobic work on the water is less.
Yeah, interesting. And then obviously you've also worked with New Zealand rowing there for both the Rio and London Olympic Games, and we might shift there in a moment about what you learnt from those experiences. But Dan, Spa, what do we do there? Just jump into a hot spa?
It's a similar sort of similar kind of approach and protocol to what you would do in the sauna. Generally, so another PhD student who's also AUT University, I'm not his supervisor, but I kind of follow what he's doing a little bit, and he's looking at short-term heat acclimation exercises for soldiers going into being sent out to really hot climates to work or do whatever, to spend time there, and he's compared sauna versus the spa, and generally people can cope with this. So they'll do a bout of exercise where they get their core temperature up, and then they would sit either in the spa or in the sauna. And we've been finding that it's a really strange thing, is that people feel fine when they're in the spa and they can cope a long time after it. But we've had instances of people coming out of the spa and then the after effect is of them getting really, really hot, and almost some guys have collapsed as a result. So there seems to be this after effect. So maybe, we don't know the results yet, but maybe there's a longer effect of the spa. Like when you get out, you stay hot for longer, which is another important thing. But I would say, I think my warning with the spa is, having had less experience with the spa, is just be don't go too long. I think you definitely want to set it to, starting at 15 minutes and see how you feel, because you can run into this area where it feels quite nice and you spend a lot longer than you need to in there, and you get and then it can be quite problematic in the end. So yeah, I think you start off with a little bit lesser, maybe like starting off with 10 to 15 minutes rather than starting off with 20.
And similar, maybe every other day.
Yeah, well, you start off with the same block.
Okay.
So the first, 2 weeks out, you would do the same kind of everyday block.
Yep.
And then the week before the event, you would use the same. Yeah, you just do every other day.
Every other day, sorry, yeah. That's great. Thanks for clarifying, Dan. And then, Dan, it sort of throws over to the next logical theme, which would be how to best maximise your time then exercising in the heat actively, or one of these passive modalities we just spoke about, in the role that hydration, electrolytes, which is another module I know, which you go into great detail with your Endure IQ online course. But can you touch on that, Dan? How do we get out from one of these sessions? What are we meant to have been doing, and what are we meant to do after it to maximise that stress?
Yeah, so it's funny, I'm doing a lot of research into like hydration and electrolytes at the moment, as you mentioned, and honestly, it's been really challenging because it's a very polarized debate, for one. And that is on the side of hydration and on the side of electrolytes. So and also it's just massive. It's so big, and like we've actually had to split the module into two, like a module 6A and a module 6B, because it's so big. And the really, so you have the so you have hydration. Some people believe you should drink to thirst. Some people think you should drink to body weight. And then electrolytes, some people believe that sodium is the absolute key to everything. And some people believe that you don't have to worry about electrolytes at all because you have internal salt stores and you can figure it, your body can figure it all out for itself. So, but undoubtedly being hydrated is important. Like, you can't deny that. And one of the main things of people performing well in the heat has been shown that you start the race in a hydrated state, and you don't, that's the main thing that seems to come out of the literature, is that how you start that race is really important. So you do not want to get to that start line at the dehydrated state. Just to come back to the heat acclimation side of things, some research shows that as soon as you drink after exercise, after like you're trying to make a heat acclimation, you're kind of nullifying some of the effects. So some people would suggest that you actually hold off drinking for the first hour, and then after that you take on as much fluid as you like. Whether you drink that to body weight or not, I personally sit on the side of the fence that I don't think you need to. You just drink to thirst, and you'll find yourself out, and you'll be sorted. But yeah, as long as the most important thing is that you have fluids available and those fluids are palatable. So what I mean by that is that I don't necessarily think that electrolytes are necessary, but the great thing about electrolytes and these hydration drinks is that it makes you drink a little bit more, and it's quite hard to drink a lot of water, and people generally underdrink as a result. So I always prefer to get some kind of non-calorie electrolyte drink that will help people drink that little bit more, and just have it readily available all the time, a bottle, and that would normally take care of itself.
And is the non-calorie criteria there based on just low gastrointestinal upset risk, or is there?
Yeah, and fluid absorption is a major one. So generally, what we know is the rate of fluid absorption in the gut and the gastrointestinal side of things is kind of set, but it's influenced by the energy density of the drink. So if you've got a high energy dense drink, generally the gastrointestinal absorption is a little bit less. So it would help with your gastrointestinal absorption, which is kind of a good thing to have, to be on the positive side of.
To have a low calorie, yeah, got it. That's really interesting stuff, Dan. And the whole, as you say, I do not envy your position trying to sift through a very polarised landscape there and come out with practical takeaways.
Honestly, it's been great, because I'm really learning a lot about it, and I think everyone comes with everything. We haven't even talked about low carb diets or anything like that, but I think everybody comes with their own personal bias, and you can't. you can't get away from that sometimes. I'm sure even with your own practice as a physio, you'll have certain beliefs that, you've seen work yourself, and then you come with your own bias of how things should be done. And I think, for me personally, I've never really paid much attention to my hydration. If you ask me how much sodium I had in Kona in 2018, I haven't got absolute skippity clue, because I've never paid any attention to it. So I obviously come with my own bias, but then you've got other people who are so set and so believe that a set sodium amount is really critical. Sweat sodium testing is really important. You have to put the right sodium back in. And people report successes with this as well. And but then you've got the other side, like the Tim Note side, who are completely opposite. So within the course, I'm hoping to get a couple of interviews with two people who are opposite ends of the spectrum, to kind of give both sides of the story. I mean, I know where I sit, but I also, I want people to make their own decisions. So
yeah, no, it's a healthy position, Dan. Well done. And Dan, just to link that back in with the topic of heat stress, if you're starting a race dehydrated, then is it just that your ability to adapt to those ambient conditions, which are threefold in factors, as you mentioned at the top of the show, is less?
It is less, because I mean, one of the main ways we cool, right, is that we sweat. That sweat then evaporates. So, and that sweat is coming from intercellular fluids and extracellular fluids. So the extracellular fluids being that in the blood plasma. So you want that fully topped up, and you obviously want to be fully topped up in the intracellular fluids. So, and that's what one of the things is that's quite interesting, is that when we exercise, we're always shifting that intracellular fluid into the extracellular compartments, into the blood, because we're trying to keep the blood plasma volume topped up, and we can cope very, very well and lose a lot of body weight, sometimes up to 4 or 5% before there is actually any decrement in performance, because of our ability to shift fluids around the body from intracellular to extracellular and keep the blood plasma volume alive. But there is a point, of course, where you're just gonna, if you don't keep on drinking, or you don't have fluids available, you will slow down. Your blood becomes too viscous. You lose a lot of extracellular fluid. You feel very, very thirsty, because your serum osmolarity of the blood has gone up a lot. And thirst is one of the main driving responses of slowing down. If you feel thirsty, you are definitely going to slow down. So if you think about what that means from a starting point, you're just basically, it's a bit like what we talked about with the heat sink. You're starting at a less positive position, where you have, you're fully topped up and you have that ability to move fluids around.
Just less able, less capable, like starting a ride with flat tires.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, it's very similar to that. Yeah.
Cooling strategies. I've heard you reference that, and I think it's so interesting. The perception of heat. If you think it's hot, then it's probably going to affect your performance more. Cooling. Is there any practical tips you can share around best ways to stay cool, and does it matter?
Yeah. So in this module for the course, we've got Dr. Chris Stevens, he did his PhD in the area of slushy, so slurry ingestion, so drinking slushy, and he's kind of a real pre-cooling expert. So don't want to step on his toes too much, but I can give it a bit of a crack on what I know. So there are many cooling strategies. Some are obviously more effective than others. Some of the ones that that have been shown to be the most effective of recent years is the ingestion of cold beverages is a major one. More recently, people have suggested that slushy ingestion, so actual ice, is even more effective at cooling. So I don't know, like my good friend Professor Paul Lawson, he invented the flow bottle, which was basically a bottle that's designed to put ice slushy into, like, to drink it on the go. But it's, there's just the practicalities of it are really, really hard, because it's really hard to keep it cool, and by the time you get to it, it's hard. I mean, the bottle is designed itself to keep cool, but it's quite a hard thing to do practically. So with the slushy, it's it's been shown that it is an effective way of cooling pre and during, and it's to do with the phase change of ice to water. So it's called the enthalpy of fusion, and it draws heat basically, and can cool the core and cool you down. Also, even cooling of the mouth rinsing cold fluids has been shown to make you feel a lot cooler. And in the end of the day, perception of heat is absolutely everything. If you feel cooler, you will perform better. And that's where all this stuff comes in, which is, even some of the menthol rubs, menthol swirling has been shown to have an effect. So drinking menthol fluids and spitting it out, that's another way that you can be effective. But these are all attempts to either cool the inside of your mouth, cool the skin. Cooling the skin is absolutely critical.
So there's a core temperature and also the skin temperature considerations, but that key statement, if you feel cooler, you will perform better. And those ice vests, Dan, obviously the Tokyo Olympic Games are on hold or pushed out a year at the moment, but if I think about triathlon, the blue vests, and I know you've had experience with these working with New Zealand rowing there, these vests, are they seemingly are used a lot. Is that just an attempt to reduce the perception of heat?
Yeah, so, they do reduce the perception of heat. And again, it comes back to the practicalities of their use. So I've never been too much of a fan of them, but it depends on, I haven't looked at any of the new recent innovations in that space. And the idea is that with all these things, the pre-cooling stuff, it's all to do, we talked about the heat sink and the acclimation response, but you're trying to further increase the heat sink. So another one could be getting in a tub of cold water just before and cooling the core temperature right down, because your heat sink, you're trying to increase the heat sink, the pre-cooling, making yourself, so you're starting with a lower core temperature, which is important for long duration endurance events. But something like kayak that I'm involved with doesn't really matter too much. They're done in 2 minutes and they're not gonna get hot enough. But a marathon or something like that, you want to have that. You want to really be as cool as you can when you start on the core, but also have warm muscles. So you're kind of marrying up these two things, right? Which is where the ice vests come in, because you can still do a warm up.
Yes.
You can move the muscles. You can keep the muscles hot, but keep the core cold, which is what you're trying to achieve overall.
That makes sense. And Dan, it makes me think of the launch of the Super League Triathlon series on Hamilton Island. Incredibly hot, incredibly humid, unbelievably humid. And Alistair Brownlee had come out to race, and he was, by his own standards, not in his fittest shape post the 2016 Rio Olympic Games success. And everyone else, I was in the rooms with some physio duties, and everyone else was out well and truly on the start line, pretty much 5 or 10 minutes it was before the race started, and Alistair had requested a wheelie bin full of ice, and he was sitting in the locker room. Everyone else was out there, and he was, I'm going out at the last minute I can. And I thought, wow, he's doing very different things to everyone else, but I guess that would have been an attempt to increase his heat sink.
Exactly. That's exactly what it would have been doing. This is where the ice vests come in, because obviously Alistair on that side, he's not only cooling his core, he's also cooling all his muscles as well. Whereas the ice vests are the attempt to try and keep the core cold and yeah. So the thing is, so when we were just go into rowing. So back, one of the hottest events that I've been to is in 2013, year after London, the World Championships was in Korea, very hot event. And we were using, our protocol there was they would warm up and I would have ice towels ready to go. And as they're warming up, I'd just put them over their shoulders. And, that feeling of the skin being cooler, and they would also drink ice slushy at the same time. And that was the attempt to make sure when they finish their warm up on land, they get straight on the water and they would at least start a little bit cool. And that's what you're trying to achieve. So ice towels I was in a study in a study here in New Zealand that used slushy and ice towels. We had it was such a long time ago, but we had it was compared slushy and ice towels to just slushy to just ice towels. And the slushy and ice towels combo seemed to be the best in terms of performance in the heat. because you get skin temperature cooling the core temperature, but you could also exercise at the same time. So that's what we found to be the most effective.
So interesting. Some of the most basic things can sometimes be the best, right? So
yeah, for sure.
And then practically applying this to some long course events can be tricky in hot conditions, because you're not always going to have ice towels available at the halfway point of a marathon off the bike, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I always tell my athletes is, like in Kona, for example, a real practical tip is that you can always figure these things out. So when you come out of the water, for example, there's quite a long run from where you run out of the water to the start of the bike. And because it's quite early, if you have a decent bottle that's frozen, it'll still be cold. So you can grab that bottle as you run from out the swim to the bike, and you can at least take in a good bolus of cold fluids to cool the core temp a bit before you start the bike. But you feel better for that. But the problem is it's over such a long time, and you could put something in the aid station in Harvey, but that's not going to be cold by the time you get to it. So there's all these little practicalities. There's always best practice, but then working in the field and doing it yourself, it presents a whole new world of challenges.
You're listening to Dr. Dan Plews on this, an expert edition of the Physical Performance Show, featuring Dr. Dan Plews on all things heat training and acclimation for the endurance athlete. If you missed last week's episode with featured performer, 2018 World Triathlon Series champion Vicky Holland, then here's a little snippet of what you missed.
How would I describe being in the zone? I think it's a bit of something probably taken from mindfulness, is just feeling really present in everything that you're doing, having a real kind of intention behind everything that you do and understanding why you're doing it. For me, that kind of manifests itself, especially in triathlon racing, when I'm able to be really tactically savvy, because I know exactly what I'm doing, I know exactly why I'm doing it, and I know what I'm hoping to achieve and hopefully then am achieving. So yeah, I think being present in what I'm doing.
To tune into the full episode featuring Vicky's highs, lows, and many learnings, in particular around recovery from significant injury, jump over to wherever it is that you enjoy the show from, and whilst there, peruse the archives dating right back to episode 1 featuring Australian surf lifesaving champion Ali Day. For now, let's jump back with this week's expert edition with Dr. Dan Plews on all things heat training and acclimation for the endurance athlete. Dan, you've been so generous in sharing today, and I know we've in many ways just scratched the surface of this topic, this huge topic, and certainly would encourage people to jump over to Endure IQ. But before we just throw to the practical places people can find you and find out more about your services, Dan, 2 final questions that every guest gets asked. 1, what would be Dan Plews' top tip, top learning out of everything you've learned through your own athletics success, all your academic work, applied work, that would help the listener of this show perform at their physical best?
Yeah, I thought about this a little bit, and I think I'm going to steal this. I'm going to steal this quote from Jan Frodeno, because it's something that I just think is so true. And having been involved in the sport for a very long time, we talked on email about how I've been doing the sport basically since 1990, the early 1990s when I was like 9, is that, I think time and time again now, as I'm more involved in the sport, I get so many people emailing me, asking me questions, looking for a hack, this word hack, and how can you do this? But I think the biggest thing is there's no such thing as a hack. The only hack is that you hack away every day. And I think that consistency and being smart with your training, hacking away every day, is the thing that will get you to the best position. Don't think about what you're trying to achieve now. Think about what you're trying to achieve in 3 or 4 years. Take that long-term goal and just crack away every single day. And that's the best tip I can possibly give.
That's beautiful. Dan, and physical challenge for the week. Every guest issues listeners with a physical challenge for the week. So what is Dr. Dan Plews' physical challenge? Yeah,
well, it's not really that physical, but I think it's definitely a challenge. And I just challenge everyone to turn off their phones for a day.
Wow.
Like, turn off your phone for an entire day. Don't look at it once. And I think it's such a powerful thing, and it really does. I mean, I try and do it quite a lot, and I find that, especially at the moment, there's a lot going on in the world. It's so tempting to look on social media, look in the news, and get caught up, and just, and that is, it kind of is physical, because the physicality of you trying to not do that on your own brain is quite something. So I think that's my physical challenge, is just turn your phone off for a day.
Dan, I really like that. So we're going to call this the Dan Plews Physical Challenge, turn your phone off for a day. And it's so practical and specific, so I think there's power in that. Dan, where can we find out more about your coaching services, the online learning modules, which I think you'd be crazy not to jump on and learn more about these topics if you're truly out there trying to perform at your physical best. So where can we find out more?
Yeah, so I'm on social media, Instagram and Twitter, most active on Instagram at the Plews. And unfortunately, what we talked about before is a name I can't get rid of now, but so that's what it is. And then also the website endureiq.com, and that's where we have all our services, all our online courses. So we're currently building what we call them LDT, so long distance triathlon. So we have LDT 101, which was all about low carbohydrate performance long distance triathlon. I have LDT 102, which is basically the training fundamentals, and that's a lot of kind of bringing our Steven Sealer's endurance hierarchy of endurance needs into long distance triathlon training, and then currently building LDT 103. And it's aimed at athletes, coaches, people who, we're all about, our motto is that we want to empower people's performance, to try and get an understanding of the why as well as the what, because I believe that it's a massive way that you can really keep yourself hacking away every day.
Dr. Dan Plews, thank you for your contribution. Outstanding.
No, thanks for having me on.
So there you have it, another episode of the Physical Performance Show. And I trust and I know you enjoyed today's sharings from Dr. Dan Plews. Now, if you did, please be sure to jump over and follow Dan. Dan's easily found over on Instagram at The Plews. Now, be sure to also check out Dan's amazing resource, his online training courses over at endureiq.com. There you will find 2 courses currently available. One, Long Distance Triathlon 101, the practical application of low carbohydrate performance for long distance triathlon. And the second course, LDT 102, the training program fundamentals for long distance triathlon. And get set for the release of course number 3 around all things heat training with some of the teachings that Dr. Dan has shared today. Please let Dan know what it was that you took from today's episode, what learnings and how you will apply them. Don't forget to keep the podsies coming. They are a whole lot of fun. That's simply a screenshot of the episode you're enjoying and tagging in the show and myself at Physical Performance Show on Instagram and at Brad_beer. Massive thanks to those who have been leaving ratings and reviews on iTunes, including Pipsy Cola, who commented, absolutely loving these podcasts, so poignant and on point. Keep up the fab work, Brad and team. Pipsy Cola, thank you for taking the time to leave that review. And if you've been enjoying more than 4 episodes of the show, then we'd love to hear from you. It's simple, jump over to ratings and reviews from iTunes and rate and review away. Don't forget to hit subscribe to keep the show coming into your earbuds each and every week as episodes go live on a Thursday evening. A massive thanks to the 3 very good folk who make the show possible: Susan Wilkin on all things show administration, Matthew Walding on all things show graphic design, and our audio engineer extraordinaire, Mr. Daryl Misson. Don't forget, if you are looking to learn from one of the leading authorities around all things optimizing endurance training, then be sure to jump over and register for the upcoming July 2-hour live stream with prior featured expert of the show, Dr. Stephen Seiler. You'll find all details over at pogophysio.com.au/Dr. Seiler. And of course, do not forget to follow and engage with today's featured expert, Dr. Dan Plews. He is a wealth of knowledge, as you have just heard. Now, coming up on next week's episode of the Physical Performance Show, we keep the New Zealand Kiwi theme going, and I'll share with you a conversation that I recently had with 12 times, that's right, 12 times Ironman Triathlon New Zealand champion Cam Brown. Cam has been racing professionally for 35 years and boasts one of the greatest resumes in the sport of long course triathlon. Cam has twice been the runner-up in the Hawaii Ironman World Championships and twice been the bronze medalist. Cam shares his insights into longevity in the sport, developing an efficient running style, mindset, and so much more. Following Cam, there is a mix of stellar guests, including Australian swimming legend Michael Klim, an Olympic silver and bronze medalist, none other than Johnny Brownlee himself. So until then, keep pursuing your physical best performance. I'm Brad Beer, and this has been the Physical Performance Show.